Hey guys, welcome back to my shop. Today I'm going to be working on my new daily driver, the 2011 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And I've had some suspension issues, so stay tuned and I'll show you how to maybe diagnose it on yours and fix it for cheap. So it's an 11 Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit, and I've already kind of trying to get it up to Kenny spec. It's already got a full paint correction, ceramic coated. I've even done a headlight retrofit. But today we're going to be looking at the suspension. So what happened is the other day I came home and I, for some reason, left it in like off-road level 1. When I came out the next morning, the front end was almost on the ground, and I thought, oh crap, did I blow a spring? And it turns out that I got lucky, and you probably, if you have this problem, might have the same issue. For less than 60 bucks, we can get it back on the road, and I'm going to show you how to diagnose this particular issue, how to fix it, and then also how to do it without losing nitrogen. Now these things have a closed loop system, so they don't take in air from outside like my Mercedes or even my wife's Tahoe. They actually have a nitrogen tank behind the back seat. Now that tank is sealed and it only has a certain amount of nitrogen. If you let it leak out too much, you're gonna have to go to the dealer to get it fixed or refilled, I guess. So anyway, I'm gonna show you how to not lose any nitrogen and get it back on the road quick. So underneath the hood, these are the top of your shocks. Obviously you can see there's an air line going to a fitting right here. I noticed on mine when I've sprayed it with some soapy water, bubbles just start forming, especially if you touch it at all. And so what's happening is no matter what position this was in, bubbles were coming out right here and on the other side. So it looks like what we got here is not a leaky shock. It's just the valve in here, and I'm assuming there's an O-ring that goes between this airline and this fitting that just over time deteriorates or gets some contamination. So you can see these bubbles are still growing and I haven't even touched it at all yet. But the problem we're going to run into is when we undo these, you're going to let a lot of air out. Now the Jeep Grand Cherokees have a sealed system. So if you don't address these quickly, you can actually lose a lot of the nitrogen in your system, and then your only option is to go to a dealership to refill it. So we're going to go ahead and replace these, and I'm going to show you how to do it without really losing any air at all. So here's the plan. The car is in off-road mode 3 right now. So that means that there's the maximum amount of air inside the shock. If we let if we take that connector off on the top, obviously we're going to lose a ton of nitrogen. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the link between the sensor, and we're going to temporarily, better ghettoly, attach it in a way that the suspension will be lower than it is before. Essentially, a lot of people install lowering links on these so they can ride lower. We're just going to do one that just works just enough that we can get this done. The first thing we're going to need to do is unhook it. I just like to use these. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but essentially just nice and evenly without putting any strain on the sensor rod. It just pops right out. It's a pretty simple, easy. You can almost do it by hand. So now we're going to take a twisty tie. You can also use a zip tie. I just wanted it to be easier to unhook. We're simply going to twist it around the top of the shaft, just like that. And then we're going to take the other end and tie it to the ball part of the shaft. So if you look in there, what it is the sensor rod is now lower than the link. So that is going to tell the computer that it needs to let some air out of the shock to make the right level. So we're going to go do it to the other side. Then we're going to put the car into park mode, which is going to lower the car all the way. You're going to see this is pretty slammed when we're done. That's going to let most of the air out of the shock and back into the tank in the back. So when we release the top, you're not going to lose any nitrogen. Okay, so now it's been lowered down to a very low setting, so most of the air has been pumped out of the shock and into the back. The valves should be closed, so it won't lose any from the back. But when we take off that fitting, some of the air will still come out of here. So to provide additional support, I'm just going to put some jacks underneath the back, or underneath the front. So what I'm going to do, so the air suspension doesn't run during any of this, I'm going to disconnect the battery. Just a 10 millimeter. Negatives right up top, or right up front, I guess. There you go. So now what I've done is I've used jacks on either side just to raise the car up a little bit. Remember, The battery is unhooked, so the pump isn't going to run. What this does is essentially create neutral pressure inside the shocks, so we're not going to lose any nitrogen out of the shocks. Okay, so this is the actual part we're going to be replacing from this brass fitting up to here. To get it off, if you look at it, you'll see that it basically is two tabs that you got to pry away. So what I'm going to do is I have a pick and then just a small screwdriver. We're going to start by going into the bottom one and just gently prying it down. Now you don't want to over pry these things because they are plastic, and like in this particular case, this one's 9, almost 10 years old already. So you just want to be very gentle with them. So we got our screwdriver in the bottom one. We're going to use our pick to pry open this top one. Okay. Now you can inspect these hoses. What I'm going to do is simply clean it up. I already looked at the other side. There's no cracks on the hoses. I believe it's all just that O-ring right there. So we have just a 12mm wrench. Come off really easily. Old one's off. We got our brand new one right here. Okay. They have O-rings, so there's really no reason to over tighten. The only other thing we're going to do is just make sure there's no dirt or anything on the tube at all. We could just gently insert it. If you're really having problems, I suppose you could use some O-ring lubrication. Click it on there. Protect the thing back. That's it. With the sensors hooked back up, everything done underneath the hood, I've let the car lower back down to a normal ride height, just maybe slightly below the parking level that it is originally. And now we're going to go ahead and turn on the car and let them pump them up and check for leaks. The Jeep has now been returned to its normal ride height. We have our new sensors installed, so we're just going to spray on some bubbly mixture. No bubbles at all. Great. Check the other side. Perfect. All right, guys, and we are done. We've replaced both valves. They no longer leak at all. I think we did it and caught it in time before we wore out either our pump from trying to keep up with the leak and or bleed out too much nitrogen. So hopefully this video was helpful to you guys. I didn't see any other ones on YouTube that showed you how to do it without losing any nitrogen. And so if you enjoyed this video or it helped you at all, please consider liking and even subscribing. And I'd appreciate it. Keep the channel growing and give me more time to do stuff like this. Thanks, guys. Now for this job, you're really gonna only need some basic tools. We're gonna need a 12mm wrench, a 10mm 1/4 inch drive, something like this to pop off some suspension sensors, and then a couple really small screwdrivers and or picks to fix it. The parts we're going to be using are new valves from RMT, Rebuild Master Tech. I'm not sponsored by them. Now RMT, if you're watching this and you want to send me some money, I'll take it.